Remember those history lessons about World War II? The grainy black and white footage, the maps with arrows pointing every which way.
Yeah,
I mean, for a lot of us, it felt like ancient history. But today, we're not just dusting off those old textbooks.
right.
We're going deep,
Mhm.
behind the scenes,
Absolutely.
into this story of betrayal, ambition, and the terrifying road to a war that reshaped the world.
It's a story that still resonates today.
Yeah, and we're specifically going to look at how Hitler, fresh off his victory in Czechoslovakia, set his sights on Poland,
Uh-huh.
really putting that whole world on edge.
What's crucial to understand is that the invasion of Poland, while yes, it was the spark that ignited the war, it wasn't just this isolated event.
Right.
It was the culmination of years of planning, broken promises, and frankly, a chillingly calculated strategy by Hitler to reshape Europe, according to his own twisted vision.
Right, because you can't really understand the fall of Poland without first looking at what happened to Czechoslovakia just months earlier.
Yeah.
The Munich Agreement, where they were forced to hand over the Sudetenland, that was supposed to be the path to peace.
Right.
What a tragic miscalculation that turned out to be.
It was a turning point, not towards peace, but towards emboldening Hitler.
Yeah.
I mean, it showed him that the Western powers, France and Britain, were willing to appease his aggression. He saw it as a sign of weakness, not a path to compromise.
And Czechoslovakia wasn't just some random piece of land either. I mean, it was a thriving democracy in the heart of Europe
Absolutely.
with a strong industrial base,
Oh.
especially those famous Skoda works.
The Skoda works were a prize that Hitler coveted.
Yeah.
They were producing some of the most advanced weaponry in Europe.
Wow.
Tanks, artillery, even aircraft components.
Yeah.
Taking control of those factories would be a major boost to his military ambitions.
It's amazing to think that we can actually read the transcripts of Hitler's secret speeches to his military commanders.
I know, it's incredible.
He laid out his whole plan, step by step, how he intended to dominate Europe. He even boasted about embracing the brutality of past German conquerors.
These speeches are absolutely chilling. They reveal a man consumed by a fanatical ideology, a belief in German racial superiority, and a vision of a Europe ruled by force.
Wow.
And what's perhaps most disturbing is how openly he discussed his plans. I mean, he wasn't hiding his intentions, he was flaunting them.
And yet the world seemed to be sleepwalking toward disaster. Even after the Munich Agreement, there was still this hope that maybe, just maybe, Hitler could be reasoned with.
There was a persistent belief, especially in Britain, that appeasement was the best way to avoid another devastating war. But as Hitler's actions grew bolder, that belief began to crumble.
Yeah.
The annexation of Czechoslovakia was the wake-up call that many had been desperately trying to ignore.
So walk us through how it actually happened, this so-called peaceful annexation of
It
Czechoslovakia.
was anything but peaceful. In March of 1939, Hitler engineered the separation of Slovakia from the rest of Czechoslovakia, using it as a pretext to move his troops in.
Yeah.
Then came that infamous meeting between Hitler and Czech President Emil Haka, a scholar actually, known for his translations of English literature.
It's almost hard to imagine those two in the same room.
The contrast couldn't be more stark.
Yep.
Haka, a man of peace and intellect, suddenly thrust into this high-stakes game of power politics, facing a dictator who thrived on intimidation and aggression.
Oh, wow.
Hitler, surrounded by his generals, ranting and raving, threatening to bomb Prague into oblivion.
And poor Haka, he actually collapsed under the pressure.
It was a scene of utter humiliation, carefully orchestrated by Hitler to break Haka's will and force him to surrender his country without a fight.
I mean, just imagine the emotional toll that must have taken on Haka to see his nation, his life's work, just crumble before his eyes.
It's unimaginable.
So Hitler gets his way, marches into Prague, and proclaims it the happiest day of his life.
Oh, he did.
He even declares himself the greatest German in history.
Unbelievable.
So how did the German people react to all of this?
While the Nazi leadership celebrated, everyday Germans had a more mixed reaction.
Oh, really?
There was a sense of unease, a feeling that things were moving too fast in a dangerous direction.
Interesting.
Even some reports from within the Nazi Party acknowledged that many people didn't understand or support the annexation.
It sounds like Hitler might have been starting to lose touch with the people he claimed to represent. But on the world stage, this was a major turning point, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The annexation of Czechoslovakia shattered any remaining illusions about the effectiveness of appeasement.
Right.
Even those who had supported Chamberlain's policies began to realize that Hitler's appetite for conquest could not be satisfied with compromises and concessions.
Yeah.
The mood in Britain and France shifted dramatically. The inevitability of war, once a distant fear, was now a looming reality.
So, with Czechoslovakia firmly under his control, Hitler turns his attention eastward. And there, in the heart of Europe, stood Poland, a nation with a complex history and a dangerous position between two powerful and hostile neighbors.
A nation about to be caught in the whirlwind. Poland's story in the years leading up to World War II is a complex one,
Yeah.
marked by both resilience and vulnerability. I mean, it had regained its independence after World War I, piecing itself back together after over a century of being partitioned between Russia, Prussia, and Austria. But its borders were still contested,
Right.
and it faced constant pressure from both Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east.
So it was like they were caught in this giant tug of war,
Exactly.
with their very existence at stake.
And to make matters even more complicated, there was this sliver of land called the Polish Corridor,
Right.
which gave Poland access to the Baltic Sea, but cut right through German territory.
Oh, the Polish Corridor, one of those lines on the map that just seemed destined to cause trouble. And it also led to that issue of the city of Danzig, right?
Right.
A historically German city that had been made a free city under the League of Nations after World War I.
Both the Polish Corridor and Danzig became symbols of what many Germans perceived as the unfairness of the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
The treaty that ended World War I. Hitler exploited this resentment, portraying Poland as this artificial creation that had stolen rightful German territory.
So Hitler sets his sights on Poland, and just like with Czechoslovakia, he starts by making demands. He wants Danzig back, a highway and a railway through the corridor, and he even tries to pressure Poland into joining his anti-communist pact. What was the reaction from the Polish government?
They flatly refused. They knew that giving in to Hitler's demands would be tantamount to surrendering their independence. They would become a German puppet state, with no control over their own destiny.
It must have taken incredible courage to stand up to a dictator who had already swallowed up Austria and Czechoslovakia, knowing the risks involved.
It was a defiant act. But it also reflected, I think, a certain naivete about the international situation. The Polish leadership, particularly Foreign Minister Józef Beck, seemed to believe that Britain and France would come to their aid if Germany attacked.
Yeah.
They saw themselves as the front line of defense against Hitler's aggression.
And there's that famous moment when Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, issues his guarantee to Poland, pledging to defend them if they were attacked. It seemed like this dramatic shift in British policy, this recognition that appeasement had failed.
The guarantee was a turning point, but whether it was a genuine commitment or a desperate bluff is still debated by historians. Chamberlain himself was deeply ambivalent about war.
Right.
He had staked his reputation on appeasement, and going to war with Germany would be a complete reversal of his entire foreign policy.
It's interesting to consider what was going on in Hitler's mind at this point. Here he is on this roll, successfully expanding the German Reich, and suddenly Britain draws a line in the sand.
Hitler was furious. He saw the guarantee as a personal betrayal by Chamberlain.
Wow.
He had believed that Britain would ultimately accept his dominance in Eastern Europe, and now they were directly challenging his ambitions.
And we have accounts of him ranting and raving about Poland, calling them delusional for resisting him. He even vowed to brew them a devil's potion. I mean, it's chilling to read those words, knowing what was to come.
Those pronouncements weren't just empty threats.
Right.
Behind the scenes, the German military was already drawing up plans for the invasion of Poland.
Oh, wow.
Operation White, as it was called, was designed to be a lightning-fast conquest, a blitzkrieg that would crush Polish resistance before Britain and France could react.
It sounds like they were determined to make Poland an example, to show the world what happened to those who dared to defy the Third Reich.
The level of planning and preparation is chilling. General Franz Halder, the German Army Chief of Staff, even used the word liquidated when describing their objectives in Poland. It wasn't just about military victory, it was about annihilation. But then, in a twist that shocked the world, something completely unexpected happened. A pact was made between two sworn enemies, the Nazis and the Soviets.
It's hard to even wrap your head around it. The Nazis and the Soviets,
No, right?
these ideological arch-enemies, suddenly joining forces, it seemed impossible.
Right.
Yet there it was,
Mm-hmm.
in black and white, the Nazi-Soviet pact. What were they thinking?
Well, the pact sent shockwaves through the world for a reason. It was a complete reversal of everything both sides had been proclaiming for years.
Right.
The Nazis built their entire ideology on anti-communism,
Yeah.
and Stalin had denounced fascism as the ultimate evil. Yet beneath the ideological rhetoric, both Hitler and Stalin were driven by cold, hard pragmatism
Okay.
and a shared desire for territorial expansion.
So let's break it down. What were the motivations on each side that led to this unlikely alliance?
Well, for Hitler, the pact was a strategic masterstroke. It neutralized the threat of a two-front war, allowing him to focus his full military might on conquering Poland
Right.
without fearing Soviet intervention. And let's not forget the economic benefits. The pact also secured access to vital Soviet resources, like oil and grain, which would be crucial for sustaining a prolonged conflict.
It makes perfect sense from Hitler's perspective. A calculated move to further his ambitions. But what about Stalin? What did he gain from this deal with the devil?
Stalin's motivations were more complex, rooted in a deep distrust of the Western powers. He believed that Britain and France were trying to use Germany as a weapon against the Soviet Union, hoping to see the two totalitarian regimes destroy each other. The pact, in his view, was a way to buy time, to strengthen the Soviet military, and exploit the situation to his advantage.
And he certainly did exploit the situation. The pact included a secret protocol, a hidden agreement that carved up Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. This gave Stalin a free hand to seize the Baltic states, eastern Poland, and even parts of Romania.
Yeah, that secret protocol, revealed only after the war, exposes the chilling cynicism at the heart of the pact. These two dictators, responsible for some of the most horrific crimes in human history, were literally dividing up a continent on a map, like it was some kind of game.
So the stage is set for tragedy. The ink is barely dry on the Nazi-Soviet pact. And just a week later, on September 1st, 1939, German forces unleashed their blitzkrieg on Poland.
The Polish army, though brave and determined, was simply no match for the Wehrmacht's overwhelming firepower and lightning-fast tactics. The Polish campaign was over in a matter of weeks, a brutal and heartbreaking testament to the devastating effectiveness of modern warfare.
And what about the British and French guarantee? The promise to defend Poland. It turned out to be tragically hollow, didn't it?
While Britain and France did declare war on Germany, they were unable to provide any substantial military support to Poland in time. Their armies were simply not prepared for a war of this scale and intensity. The Polish people were left to face the onslaught alone, abandoned by the very powers that had pledged to protect them.
It's a tragic story. A nation caught in the crossfire of two ruthless dictatorships, betrayed by its supposed allies, and crushed under the weight of a war it didn't start. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of appeasement and the dangers of underestimating a dictator's ambition.
It's also a story of incredible courage and resilience. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Polish people never gave up hope. Their resistance to both Nazi and Soviet occupation continued throughout the war, a testament to the enduring spirit of a nation determined to reclaim its freedom.
So, after this deep dive into the road to war, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What can we learn from this dark chapter in history?
Well, I think it highlights the danger of unchecked ambition. Hitler's insatiable thirst for power led him to betray agreements, violate international law, and ultimately plunge the world into a catastrophic conflict.
And it shows the tragic consequences of appeasement. By failing to stand up to Hitler early on, the Western powers only emboldened him and made war more likely.
Finally, it reminds us of the importance of vigilance and the need to defend democratic values against all threats. The story of Poland's fate is a cautionary tale, a reminder that freedom is precious and must never be taken for granted.
It's a heavy lesson, but one worth pondering. Could this war have been prevented? Was there a different path? A moment where history could have been steered away from this catastrophe?
These are questions historians continue to debate. What if the Western powers had stood firm against Hitler's demands in Czechoslovakia? What if they had forged a strong alliance with the Soviet Union, presenting a united front against Nazi aggression? We can speculate, but the past remains stubbornly fixed, offering us only lessons, not answers.
It's a sobering thought. The past may be a foreign country, as the saying goes, but its echoes continue to reverberate in our present. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the events that led to World War II. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those minds sharp.